was adopted. I never knew my real mother. Rather, I knew her at one time, but I left her side when I was too little to be able to remember. I loved my adopted family though. They were so kind to me. I ate well. I lived in a warm and comfortable house, and I got to stay up pretty late. Let me tell you about my family real fast. First, there's my mother. I never called her mom or anything like that. I just called her by her first name, Janice. She didn't mind at all though. I called her that for so long, I don't think she even noticed. Anyhow, she was a very kind woman. I think that she is the one who recommended my adoption in the first place. Sometimes I would lay my head against her in front of the television, and she would tickle my back with her nails. She's one of those Hollywood mothers. Second, there's Dad. His real name was Richard, but he never really liked me much, so I began to refer to him as Dad in a desperate attempt to gain his affection. It didn't work. I think that no matter what I called him, he would never love me as much as his own child. That's understandable, so I really didn't press the matter. The most notable attribute of Dad was his unmoving sternness. He was not afraid to pop his children when they did something wrong. I found that out before I could use the restroom properly. He didn't hesitate to spank me. Well, I'm in line, and it's because of his methods. Lastly is my sister. Little Emily was very young when I was adopted, so we were about the same age, but she was slightly older. I like to think of her as my little sister though. We got along better than any sibling could possibly get along. We would always stay up late together and just talk. Well, she did a lot of the talking. I mostly just listened because I loved her. It was a great setup that we had. We were short on bedrooms, so because I didn't want to sleep in the living room by myself when I was little, I had a pallet set up for me next to her bed on the floor. This is where I have slept since. But it was cool with me because I enjoyed being with her, and I had always felt pretty protective of my little sis. Everything changed on a horrible Wednesday night. I was at home taking a nap when little Emily opened the front door. The sound of the door opening pulled me to a state of consciousness, and I walked from the room down the hall to the living room. That's when I first remembered it was Wednesday. I was never any good at keeping track of what day it was. Actually, I'll just go ahead and say it. My sense of time was horrible. Nevertheless, I knew it was Wednesday because Emily had just come home from her church youth group gathering. She walked in the front door and hugged me, and then was followed in by Dad and Janice. "You had a good nap," Janice said teasingly as she shuffled up my hair. I just shook my head away and snorted in a manner that clearly expressed that I was teasing back with her. "Don't you snort at your mother like that," said my father gruffly with authority. He shut the door behind him and hung up his coat. I was clearly choking. I growled under my breath. He must not have heard me because I didn't feel him smack me. Emily then proceeded to her room, and I followed. She started telling me about her day. You know, usual teenage girl stuff. But I listened so that she would feel better. After the summary, she suggested watching TV, and I obliged and jumped onto the couch as she was going for the remote. She rolled her eyes at my little watched it together until the sun went down. Emily was the kind of girl that instead of watching cartoons and soap operas, would rather watch Discovery and Animal Planet and Natural Geographic. I liked those too, so I didn't mind. Actually, those were the only channels that can hold my attention. So it got late and Janice walked up behind the sofa. Emily, it's past your bedtime. Turn off the television and go to your room. You too, she pointed at me. Emily turned off the program we were watching grudgingly and stood up. She started down the hallway to our room. As I followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. We went into our room and Emily turned off the light. Just as she did, I caught a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. It was out the window, but as soon as I redirected my line of sight to where the window was no longer in my peripheral vision, what it was that I thought I saw was gone. I still remained alert, for my sister's sake. I lay there in the darkness, with nothing but the thin ray of light from the street lamp outside to illuminate the room. It wasn't much. Time and time again, I could have sworn that I heard subtle sounds just out the window. A twig break, leaves crunching, clothes jostling. And all the while, I could smell a faint stench of sweat and blood. I kept my eyes open most of the night. The sounds outside subsided, and the smell left my nose. I began to feel at ease. My eyelids closed. Not long after that, I heard a very loud crash on the other side of the house. I was up in an instant. There's someone in the house, I barked with extreme adrenaline coursing through me. Wake up, I surely pleaded with Emily. She did, and as soon as I saw her sit up, I ran to my parents' room. Dad was dead. His neck was split open and gaping as blood spilled out of it, off the bed and onto the floor. I saw that the master bathroom's door was closed, and just before it, on the outside, was a man. A man. I don't feel comfortable calling it that. He was very large and rugged. He turned around and saw me, and that's when I saw him accurately for the first time. I won't forget it. His eyes were large and beady and trapped with lust. He was styling a beard that was badly unkempt, blood dripping off. His clothes were dirty and his face was cold. Just then I noticed the same horrid smell of sweat and blood from earlier, but this time it was overwhelming. He saw me. He saw me and grinned with a set of crooked yellow teeth. That smile threw me off. I thought that I was going to die. But then he turned back to the bathroom door, completely unperturbed by my presence. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I just yelled and cried. I watched as he shouldered through the door that was my mom's only protection. I watched as he raised the large razor that he was carrying, but had obviously neglected to use properly. I watched as he sliced her open and tore her to shreds. I then heard something, the last thing that I wanted to hear. It was Emily's scream coming from behind me. The large monstrosity looked up from my butchered mother and stared at my little sister. I was distraught. He stood up and quickly started walking toward us. My sis turned and ran, and I was at a loss when he bypassed me and went straight after her. Why was she still in the house? Had she not assessed the situation and run? Apparently not, and now she was dead, and I was alone. I ran after them both. I expected the man to kill her, as he had the rest of my family, but I was sadly mistaken. He grabbed her by the arm and jerked her as a way to make clear that he was in control. He dragged her through the house. I was making all of the noise I could now, hoping and praying that someone would come to my aid. He mustn't take her, not her. As he passed me, I backed against the wall and whimpered with terror. Why? He didn't respond. Instead, he put his free hand on my head while Emily screamed in the other hand and said, "Good boy." He gave another crooked grin and a very cold, unnatural laugh. I followed him to the door where he dragged my helpless sister after him. He opened it, pulled her out, and slammed it shut behind him. I am now sitting in the house with my mutilated adopted parents, shivering and whimpering with dismay. He's out there with her, doing who knows what to her, and I can't do anything. I would if I could, but I can't. I would chase after them in a heartbeat, but I can't. I sit here looking at the front door. I look down at my paws. If only I could open doors. The blue-eyed reflection. As a child, Jennifer had always been afraid of the dark, but as she grew up, she learned to conquer her fear. But there was something else that she had always found unsettling, a reflection in the mirror. She used to think that monsters were lurking behind the glass, waiting to drag her into another world. But as she grew older, she learned to ignore those childish fears and accept that her reflection was just a reflection. However, unlike her fear of the dark, this irrational fear of mirrors did not completely go away, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. Every time Jennifer looked at herself in the mirror, she felt a strange sense of unease. There was something off about her reflection, something that she couldn't quite put her finger on. One day, many years later, as Jennifer was getting ready for bed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She stared into her own eyes, and that's when she noticed it. Her reflection's eyes were bright blue. Jennifer blinked, thinking it was just a trick of the light. However, every time she looked into the glass, the blue-eyed reflection would appear for just a moment and then disappear, showing her real dark brown eyes. The blue-eyed reflection started appearing more frequently until it remained every time she looked at herself. At first, Jennifer thought it was just her mind playing tricks on her, but no matter how hard she blinked or rubbed her eyes, the blue-eyed reflection remained, staring back at her with those piercing blue eyes. Jennifer couldn't tear her gaze away from the mirror. She felt like she was being hypnotized, drawn into her reflection's gaze. And then, something strange started to happen. Her reflection's lips moved, but Jennifer couldn't hear any sound. She leaned closer to the mirror, trying to make out what her reflection was saying. And that's when she heard it. A voice, faint and distant, whispering her name. Jennifer stumbled back, feeling like she had been punched in the gut. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her reflection was talking to her. it wasn't just a hallucination or a dream. It was real. Jennifer knew she had to get out of there. She turned away from the mirror and ran out of the bathroom, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The next day, Jennifer avoided the bathroom at all costs. She didn't want to risk seeing her reflection again. But that didn't stop her from feeling like she was being watched. Every time she passed a mirror or a window, she felt like someone was staring back at her. Days turned into weeks, and Jennifer's fear only grew. She couldn't escape the feeling that her reflection was alive somehow, and that it was watching her every move. Then, one night, as Jennifer was brushing her teeth, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. But this time, it was different. The reflection wasn't just staring back at her with those bright blue eyes. It was smiling, unlike Jennifer. She screamed and stumbled back, knocking over her toothbrush holder. As she scrambled to pick up the scattered toothbrushes and tubes of toothpaste, she heard a faint voice whispering in her ear. "Come back and play, Jennifer. Come back and play." From that day on, Jennifer never looked at her reflection again. She covered all the mirrors in her house with blankets and sheets, and even avoided walking past store windows. She knew that her reflection was waiting for her, biding its time until it could lure her back into its grasp. And sometimes, when Jennifer was lying in bed at night, she could hear that faint voice calling out to her. "Come back and play, Jennifer. Come back and play." The excursion steamer brought us from Constantinople to the shore of the island of Principo, and we disembarked. The number of passengers was not large. There was one Polish family, a father, a mother, a daughter, and her bridegroom, and then we two. Oh yes, I must not forget that when we were already at the wooden bridge which crosses the Golden Horn to Constantinople, a Greek, a rather youthful man, joined us. He was probably an artist, judging by the portfolio he carried under his arm. Long black locks floated to his shoulders. His face was pale, and his black eyes were deeply set in their sockets. In the first moment, he interested me, especially for his obligingness and for his knowledge of local conditions. But he talked too much, and I then turned away from him. All the more agreeable was the Polish family. The father and mother were good-natured, fine people. The lover a handsome young fellow, of direct and refined manners. They had come up to Principo to spend the summer months for the sake of the daughter, who was slightly ailing. The beautiful pale girl was either just recovering from a severe illness, or else a serious disease was just fastening its hold upon her. She leaned upon her lover when she walked, and very often sat down to rest, while a frequent, dry little cough interrupted her whispers. Whenever she coughed, her escort would considerably pause in their walk. He always cast upon her a glance of sympathetic suffering, and she would look back at him as if she would say, "It is nothing. I am happy." They believed in health and happiness. On the recommendation of the Greek, who departed from us immediately at the pier, the family secured quarters in the hotel on the hill. The hotel keeper was a Frenchman, and his entire building was equipped comfortably and artistically, according to the French style. We breakfasted together, and when the when the Greek appeared again. He greeted us lightly, looked about, and seated himself only a few steps from us. He opened his portfolio and began to sketch. I think he purposely sits with his back to the rocks so that we can't look at his sketch, I said. We don't have to, said the young Pole. We have enough before us to look at. After a while he added, it seems to me he's sketching us in as a sort of background. Well, let him. We truly did have enough to gaze at. There is not a more beautiful or happier corner in the world than that very Principe. The political martyr Irene, contemporary of Charles the Great, lived there for a month as an exile. If I could live a month of my life here, I would be happy for the memory of it for the rest of my days. I shall never forget even that one day spent at Principe. The air was as clear as a diamond, so soft, so caressing, that one's whole soul swung out upon it into the distance. At the right, beyond the sea, projected the brown Asiatic summits. To the left, in the distance, purpled the steep coasts of Europe. The neighboring Jockey, one of the 9 islands of the Prince's archipelago, rose with its cypress forest into the peaceful heights like a sorrowful dream, crowned by a great structure, an asylum for those whose minds are sick. The Sea of Marmora was but slightly ruffled and played in all colors like a sparkling opal. In the distance, the sea was as white as milk, and rosy. Between the 2 islands, a glowing orange, and below us it was beautifully greenish blue, like a transparent sapphire. It was resplendent in its own beauty. Nowhere were there any large ships, only 2 small crafts flying the English flag sped along the shore. One was a steamboat as big as a watchman's booth. The second had about 12 oarsmen, and when their oars rose simultaneously, molten silver dripped from them. Trustful dolphins darted in and out among them, and dove with long, arching flights above the surface of the water. Through the blue heavens, now and then, calm eagles winged their way, measuring the space between 2 continents. The entire slope below us was covered with blossoming roses whose fragrance filled the air. From the coffee house near the sea, music was carried up to us through the clear air, hushed somewhat by the distance. The effect was enchanting. We all sat silent and steeped our souls completely in the picture of paradise. The young Polish girl lay on the grass with her head supported on the bosom of her lover. The pale oval of her delicate face was slightly tinged with soft color, and from blue eyes, tears suddenly gushed forth. The lover understood, bent down and kissed tear after tear. Her mother also was moved to tears, and I, even I, felt a strange twinge. Here mind and body both must get well, whispered the girl. How happy a land this is! God knows I haven't any enemies, but if I had, I would forgive them here, said the father in a trembling voice. And again, we became silent. We were all in such a wonderful mood, so unspeakably sweet it all was. Each felt for himself a whole world of happiness, and each one would have shared his happiness with the whole world. All felt the same, and so no one disturbed another. We had scarcely even noticed that the Greek, after an hour or so, had arisen, folded his portfolio, and with a slight nod had taken his departure. We remained. Finally, after several hours, plastic steps that characterize carefree children. We sat down in the hotel under the handsome veranda. Hardly had we been seated when we heard below the sounds of quarreling and oaths. Our Greek was wrangling with the hotel keeper, and for the entertainment of it, we listened. The amusement did not last long. If I didn't have other guests, growled the hotel keeper and ascended the steps towards us. I beg you to tell me, sir, asked the young Pole of the approaching hotel keeper. Who is that gentleman? What is his name? Who knows what the fellow's name is? Grumbled the hotel keeper, and he gazed venomously downwards. We call him the vampire. An artist. Fine trade. He sketches only corpses. Just as soon as someone in Constantinople or here in the neighborhood dies, that very day he has a picture of the dead one completed. That fellow paints them beforehand, and he never makes a mistake, just like a vulture. The old Polish woman shrieked affrightedly. In her arms lay her daughter, pale as chalk. She had fainted. In one bound, the lover had leaped down the steps. With the one hand he seized the Greek, and with the other reached for the portfolio. We ran down after him. Both men were rolling in the sand. The contents of the portfolio were scattered all about. On one sheet, sketched with a crayon, was the head of the young Polish girl, her eyes closed and a wreath of myrtle on her brow. Death's embrace. The night was dark and stormy, rain pelting against the pavement like angry fingers, tapping incessantly. Thunder roared in the distance as lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the empty street for just a brief moment. In the dim light, I lay on the cold, wet asphalt, my clothes soaked in a mixture of rainwater and my own blood. I felt weak, and I struggled to open my eyes. My breath was shallow and labored, as if every inhale and exhale was a fight for survival. The torrential downpour had done nothing to wash away the pain that enveloped my entire being. The stab wound in my abdomen still burned, blood still gushing out of the wound, soaking my clothes and pooling around me, mixing with the rainwater that flowed through the gutters. In that cold, dark street, she appeared before me. Her presence seemed to defy the chaos that surrounded us. Her long, flowing hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes sparkled like precious stones in the dim light. She laid down on my chest and told me that everything was going to be okay. As she spoke, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Her voice was soothing, like a soft lullaby that could ease even the most troubled soul. My vision was slowly fading to black, and the pain seemed to lessen with each word she uttered. Her cold, bony hand rested on my chest, its touch oddly comforting. Though I was on the precipice of death, I couldn't help but feel that everything was going to be all right. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander into the darkness, embracing the unknown that awaited me. I could hear the sound of her black feathered wings gently fluttering in the wind that accompanied the storm outside. As the life life slowly drained from my body, I knew in my heart that she was the angel of death, there to guide me on my journey to the other side. Even in the face of darkness and fear, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was by my side, ready to carry me away from the pain and suffering that had defined my final moments. I surrendered to the darkness and the cold embrace of the angel of death, letting go